Back, everybody. During the last few days, we have been laser focused on the unprecedented charges brought forth by the Biden administration against their political opponent, the 45th president, and rightfully so. But there's been so much going on that regards the current health of our economy, and GOP House lawmakers have since released a tax cut package that looks at it as if it might help millions of hardworking Americans save their money and put it towards their own families. But what's the likelihood of this getting this round of legislation through the House and then through the Senate and then on to the president's desk for a signature before the end of this year? Well, our next guest tonight is probably going to have a good answer. Brandon Arnold is the executive vice president of the National Taxpayers Union, and he joins us now. Brandon, welcome back, sir.
Thanks so much, Amanda.
All right. So they released this plan on Friday. They claim that it is going to help out big businesses, small businesses, millions of Americans. It sounds great, although I have to say I'm a little skeptical because anytime I hear anything out of Washington that claims to be that good for that many people, I have to wonder if that's true. But is it?
It's a pretty good package. I really like it. We're supporting it at National Taxpayers Union, so we are hoping it will pass. Now, it contains a number of different provisions. It's a pretty complex package of tax provisions. But I think one that's really important to everyday Americans is expanding the standard deduction. It adds about $4,000 to the standard deduction. That means combined with the existing standard deduction, which is about $28,000 for married couples filing jointly, that's going to push that to $32,000. That means you don't pay any taxes on the first $2,000 of income, and that's before you take advantage of other credits and deductions, of course. So that's going to be a huge boon for middle class workers, for families, people that are struggling to get by in this economy in this time of hyperinflation.
Yeah, I think that that's certainly going to provide some much needed relief for everyday citizens. But there are quite a few things in there for businesses as well. And obviously, you know, we are fully in the clear of COVID, but there were a lot of businesses that suffered under COVID. A lot of things that were done to businesses. A lot of them ended up having to shut down, but the retention of employees obviously cost businesses a lot. This is going to provide, I think, a little bit of relief to businesses as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the biggest provisions here. What we call bonus depreciation. It's a complicated term, but essentially what it means is that businesses can invest domestically. They can grow their companies, make capital improvements. That might be hiring or it might be buying new machinery, expanding a factory, making those kinds of physical investments in the company so that you can hire more workers, so you can grow and be more competitive, especially for our larger companies that are facing stiff competition from China, from other countries. They're financing those countries, those competitions in instances with government dollars, certainly in the case of China. Well, this allows a free market approach, allowing companies to invest in America to support their workers, to support our well-being as a country. I think it's a really, really important provision, as well as including some provisions to make sure that companies can write off the cost of research and development. That means we're going to see more scientific research in the life science space, more cures amongst our pharmaceutical companies and academic community, and as well as more innovation. Silicon Valley investing more money in research and development here, again, partially to grow our economy, partially to create more jobs, but also as we face this increased threat from China and other countries to make sure that new technologies are developed on American soil rather than being developed abroad.
Novel idea. I mean, bringing businesses back and doing that research here, manufacturing here, it's a great idea. I wonder if somebody else thought of that in the last administration. I wanted to ask you about what's happening in the markup process, because it's before House Ways and Means right now, which for those who don't know about all of the details of the committees, that's the committee that handles taxation and regulations regarding that. What do you expect to have markup process? Because in order to get it to pass through the House and also go through the Senate and ultimately not be vetoed by Joe Biden, there are going to have to be some Democrat provisions in there. What do you expect that to be?
Well, I think the Democrat provisions will probably be inserted once, knock on wood, fingers crossed, we get this through the House of Representatives, and then we start conferencing with the Senate, which of course is Democratic-led. It's already cleared the Ways and Means Committee initially, but I do think there might be some changes as it goes to the House floor, and there may be an amendment process on the House floor as well. There are some members from wealthier states like New York and California, some Republicans from these states that are concerned about the state and local tax deduction. This was amended in the 2017 tax law. It's not addressed in this bill at all, but there are some people that want to provide more in the way of tax benefits for upper income Americans that happen to reside in their states. Because when you have very high state taxes, currently you can write off only a portion of those on your federal taxes. So that may be a sticking point. There are a number of Republicans, again, from these high tax states like New York, California, New Jersey, that are grumpy about this. I'm hoping those changes don't take place because I don't think they are good tax policy. And what they do is, in fact, encourage those states like California and New York to continue to raise their state taxes, knowing that they can shelve those costs onto American taxpayers at the federal level. So I'm hoping those changes aren't made. But that's going to be a big point of contention. And that doesn't even get into the Democrats in the Senate trying to modify this. And I think they'll probably add things like an expanded child tax credit.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it absolutely does enable blue states to impose those state and local taxes, the SALT taxes. But also, selfishly, I'm one of those grumblers because I'm here in California and I would really like some relief on those, at least until I can get out of the state. And I'm not even in the highest tax bracket or anywhere near, but I'm still grumbling over it. I wanted to ask you about the cost of this. And by cost, I mean savings to the American people, because anytime they talk about this costing money for the federal government, that essentially just means that it's American people who get to save the money. So the cost they claim is going to be over the next 10 years about $240 billion. But it seems that they can recoup that with some of these garbage green energy initiatives, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the way the package is structured. There's a few $100 billion in the way of tax relief for businesses and American families. And that's offset partially by repealing some of the energy tax credits that were passed in the Inflation Reduction Act last year. The deficit impact is about $21 billion, which is a lot of money, but pretty small by Washington standards. Now, there's plenty more room to offset the costs, and I hope that we will, because we can repeal a lot more of those green provisions. There are some outside observers, including the Penn-Wharton budget model, that have said the total cost of those green energy provisions is well over $1 trillion. So I think we can easily shave a little bit more off of those costs in order to make this a deficit neutral package. Deficits have become increasingly important right now because, of course, they're helping to fuel inflation, but also the long-term viability of our economy, the long-term viability of the American government is starting to become questionable. We're looking at interest payments. Just paying off our interest this year is going to cost over $600 billion. That's a ridiculous amount. And unfortunately, it's going to get worse and worse and worse over time because Congress can't simply constrain itself when it comes to spending.
Okay, before we go, we've just got a few minutes. I want to ask you about this now infamous 1099-K reporting. This is what emerged last year, and Republicans were justifiably upset over the notion that they would get taxed if they, sold a beater car or a bicycle that was over $600. They would get taxed on that sale. Is that still in the tax code, or is that, I think the last I heard it was shelved for a year because it's a little too complicated to even figure out who would be taxed under that provision. But can you update us on that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is still part of the code, but it was delayed for a year by the IRS. And it's one of the few positive things that the IRS has done in recent memory. But thank you for giving us a year respite. This is a ridiculous provision that's in the tax code. It was passed under Democratic control last year. And what it's going to do is require everybody, like you said, $600 or more on PayPal, on Venmo. If you sell tickets on Ticketmaster's third-party site or StubHub or anything like that, the cumulative value of those sales, if they exceed $600, you're going to get this 1099-K form. It's complicated. People aren't going to understand it. They're going to be calling the IRS, trying to figure what's going on. In some cases, they might have to pay more in taxes. In some cases, they won't. But it's a very tricky and complicated form that's just going to confuse Americans. So fortunately, we paused that for a year. This new tax package that the Republicans introduced, repeal that in its entirety. We need to get that into law.
Well, I rue the day that I ever have to call the IRS and have a conversation with them, but at least they hired, I think, 5,000 more people to man the phone. So at least there's that. Brandon, as always, we're so grateful for your time tonight. We'll be sure to have you back on again in the coming to talk more about this, especially as this legislation works its way to Congress. Thank you again. All right, everybody, we've got to take a very quick commercial break, and we'll be right back after these messages.